thank you, Rob, very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Not least, I got 5 hours on a train with nobody bothering me. The work I got through was awesome. Anyway, it's kind of like, I've just come with some thoughts and some random things to get you perhaps thinking a little bit differently as you go through today. And those of you, I know some of you are going to be around tomorrow and the next day. Just really about hope, actually, if I'm honest. This is really what this is about. Oh, that's you. Oh, yes. This is an absolutely true story. About 2 months or so ago, my father was having lunch with some of his cronies, and they went to this restaurant, and he decided, when they came last morning, he decided that he would have a roast chicken dinner. So he said to the waitress, "I'd like a roast chicken dinner." And she said, "Absolutely no problem." And then she said, "Would you like an egg with that?" So my father's thinking to himself, "An egg with a roast chicken dinner? That sounds a bit odd." Like, you know, he thought, I'm not going to say anything because I want to be woke, you know, and he knows that, like, modern cheffery, they often, like, they do eggs as sauces and things like that. So he thought, well, maybe it's just some kind of posh new chefy way of doing a roast chicken dinner. So he didn't say anything. Anyway, carried on chatting with his mates. Dinner duly arrives, gets put in front of him, lovely looking roast chicken dinner, no egg. So he thinks to himself, now this is really odd. She offered me an egg, I said yes to the egg, and now there's no egg. But he thought, I don't want to look stupid. I'm not going to say, so I'm not going to ask him, I'm not going to say where's the egg, I'm just going to leave it. Anyway, this particular issue of the egg, no egg, was driving an absolute mad. The following morning, he scared the living bejesus out of my mother when he suddenly yelled, "Leg!" She was asking me for a leg. Absolutely true story. Now, the thing I love about that story, and why it's really relevant to what we're talking about today, really, is because he didn't ask any questions. He just accepted what he's been told for all sorts of reasons. He didn't question the offer of the egg. Because if he just said, egg, she would have said, no, leg. Then he wouldn't have. If when it turned up without the egg, he said, where's the egg? She would have said, no, it was a leg. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's something we've all got into the habit of, and I think it's perhaps got a little bit worse since we have access to so much social media and so much information that it becomes almost too time-consuming to question what we're being told or to really think differently about the information we're being given. And I think that's why in many ways we've become very polarised in our politics, in our views about things, because actually we're not necessarily questioning openly what we're being told and really thinking about it. So that leads me into, some of you, I'm sure you're all familiar with this, so this is a map of the world, it's called the Mercator projection. Can you all see that? It's called the Mercator projection. It was designed by Giuseppe, I want to say, Guido, something like that, Mercator, back in like the 1500s, the early 1600s. I should try and memorise the date. So this is the map of the world that we're largely familiar with, except it's not true. Actually, the world looks more like this. This is the Peter projection. And as you can see, Africa's huge, and it's all much more elongated. But even this isn't entirely the right map, because of course this is still trying to take a globe shape and flatten it out. But if you look at the two things next to each other, you can see this is the one we're instinctively drawn to, because that's the one we're so familiar with, that's the one we probably studied at school, that's the map you see all over the place. And it's incredibly hard not to then have a distorted picture of the world. So for example, Africa is a lot bigger than we think it is. We already know it's big, but it is absolutely huge. The UK is tiny, much smaller than we think it is, and interestingly, perhaps isn't at the centre of the world. Here's another way of looking at the map. Now, there's nothing in the universe, in the laws of physics, that says there's an up or a down. And particularly on a globe, there's no, wherever you are, up or down. So actually, there's no particular reason why we should always visualise the world in the way that we do. That's just as valid a picture of the world. But it's a bit discombobulating, isn't it? It feels a bit uncomfortable because we're just not familiar with that. This is another one. Now on this one, let me show you. If you have a look there, you'll see that the UK is still right in the centre of the map. Of course, all maps. But actually, there's no reason why we should be. There, we're far right. Now as a Brit, that makes me feel really uncomfortable. Put it back to what it was like. In other words, what's happening is we are so used to seeing the world in a certain way, it becomes incredibly difficult to imagine it differently. But when we lose that ability to imagine a different perspective, a different point of view, a different way of looking at the world, that's when we lose the ability to make our world better. Does that make any sense? When we accept that in the world, the expression I hate more than anything in the world is, this is the new normal. Like, and especially in a charity, if you dare ever to say or accept someone saying this is the new normal, I'm going to smack you. Violence. But seriously, because it's not our job as charities to accept what's normal, it's our job to fight to change what's normal. Does that make any sense? And we're only going to do that by testing our thinking. So now, to see if you've been paying any attention, I'm going to do a little test. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to think about the answers to the questions. No conferring. Okay, if you want to jot down your answers, that's fine, but it's really, I just want you to think what you think the answer to these questions might be. So, firstly, in all low-income countries across the world today, how many girls finish primary school? Is it 20%, 40%, or 60%? So have a think to yourself, what do you think the answer to that is? In the last 20 years, the proportion of the world in extreme poverty has almost doubled, remained about the same, or almost halved. So just think to yourselves what you think the answer is, or jot it down if you want to. Is the average current life expectancy of human beings in the world, so it's the whole world, the entire globe, every single country, poor and rich, is it 50, 60, or 70? How did the deaths per year from natural disasters change over the last 100 years? Did they more than double? Did they remain about the same? Or did they decrease to less than half? So have a think about the answer. How many of the world's 1-year-old children have been vaccinated against disease? And again, that's the entire world, from the very, very poorest to the very richest. Is it 20%, 50%, or 80%? Worldwide, on average, men currently aged 30 have spent 10 years in school. How many years have women of the same age spent in school? 9 years, 6 years, or 3 years? 9, 6, or 3. In 1996, tigers, giant pandas and black rhinos were all listed on the endangered species. How many of these species are more critically endangered today? 2, 1, or none? How many people in the world have access to some electricity? Is it 20%, 50%, or 80%? The whole world, from the poorest to the very richest. Okay, now let's see how you did. So, number 1, how many girls finish primary school in low-income countries? 60%. The proportion of the world in extreme poverty has almost halved. The average current life expectancy of human beings is 70. The deaths per year from natural disasters have decreased to less than half. 1-year-old children vaccinated against disease, you probably know where I'm going with this now, don't you? 80%. Men versus women at school, girls, 9 years, only 1 year behind. How many of these are more endangered? None of them. How many people in the world have access to some electricity? 80%. Now, how many of you can be honest, are a bit surprised by some of those answers? How many of you were instinctively drawn to the bag? Of course you were. It's completely normal and natural. We as human beings are programmed to look for what's bad, not what's right. You know, literally our brains are psychologically wired that way. When we were way back in the days when, you used to fight wild animals and stuff, you didn't see from the distance a bit short-sightedly a rapidly approaching thing and say, it might be a lion, I'll wait and see if it gets here. You legged it. You immediately assumed it was danger because that's where you kept safe. And our brains have not kept up with the world in which we're operating in. So it's completely natural to be drawn to the negative and to believe that the negative is true, especially when we get it plummeted at us all the time. We have a serious problem with knife crime, but it's nowhere near as serious as you think it would be, given the amount of coverage that's been given to it. I find these things, it's shocking, so I'm not saying it's okay, and of course we need to do more about it, put that to one side, but it's really funny how we'll sit at home watching the telly, really worrying about the increase in knife crime, whilst drinking a glass of wine and smoking a cigarette, not worrying about the fact that that's more likely to kill us than, and our kids than actually anything. Does that make any sense? So we kind of almost lost the ability to really sort of take the negative thing and we see it as the true thing. And actually the other thing about all these things that have got better because of our work, because of what we do as charities, both at home and abroad. So these are like big global ones, but there are very similar stats in the UK. Now here's the really important thing to remember. The world isn't brilliant. There are still problems. So, for example, I think in 2016, the number of children or babies who died before the age of 1 of preventable diseases was something like 4.2 million. In 2015, it was 4.3 million. But in 1950, it was 14.8 million. It's still not good enough that there are 2 million children dying before the age of 1, but it is way better than it was in 1950. So we're moving forward. We've still got a long way to go, so we mustn't ever be complacent and say actually the problems are solved, because actually, let's face it, we know they're not. What we mustn't do is get into this sort of negative thing about there's no point, there's no hope. If we as charities, ourselves, running organisations, think there isn't any hope, I mean, you don't say to somebody who comes to you, I don't know, like, a child has died, so there's no point me going on, do you? You don't say, you're right, there's no point. You don't speak to an elderly person who says, I'm on my own, I'm lonely, there isn't any point. We say, of course there's a point, and let me show you what the point is. We've got to, if anything else, as charities, we have to be purveyors of hope. Because without hope, the situation is hopeless. And that's what we are. These things have happened because of you in this room, and your predecessors, and the people before you, and the people around you. So we've got to remember, listen, what you're doing works. Start boasting about it. Stop being all like, sitting like this. Sit up, Be proud, because we are making a profound difference to the world, not just at a local tiny level, but at a big global level. Stunned into silence there, aren't you? So now I'm going to see how much have we learned. Okay, so let's see. So I want you to think to yourself, what proportion of the UK is over 65 in terms of percentage? So just think to yourself. So the average guess is 37%. The actual number is 17. So we're not a nation full of really old people, raiding our benefits and using all our, spending all our money. What proportion of the UK population has diabetes? The average guess is 27%. The actual is 5. So we're not a load of old fat people, okay? Some of us are. How many people voted in the last general election? The average guess is 47%. The actual number was 66%. So more people voted again. It'd be really interesting to see actually what the turnout is on the 12th. It could go either way, couldn't it, really? Either people that say, I've given up, or we'll see. How many people are unemployed and looking for work? So the average person guesses 24%, and the actual number is 7%. So we're not full of a whole load of, shirtless, fat, old people avoiding work, and, it's like these are all myths and they're nonsenses, but when we get those stories fed to us, we start to believe them. We start to believe that the world is much worse than it actually is. And it's very, very easy to program ourselves into thinking that. It just takes, you just want to see a snippet of news on the television, or a little bit of just repetition here and there, and before you know where you are, you believe things. You believe there's a big problem with teenage pregnancies. You believe there's a big problem with drug taking among certain communities. You believe that certain communities or certain races are more likely to commit acts of violence. You believe all of that without even noticing it, because it's so easy to program you. And I'm going to program you right now, okay? See how aware you are. Right. See that word, folk? Now you all know what that word means. So it's a word that's a description of people. And increasingly it's being used more now, because before people used to say hello chaps or hello guys, but because there's kind of connotations of sort of patriarchy around that, folk has become a sort of relaxed word to describe people without having to sort of make it masculine and feminine. So you're all familiar with that word, folk. Okay, so I have to practice it. When I turn my hands over like that, I want you to say folk, okay? Folk. Again, louder. Folk. 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 Okay, what do you call the white of an egg? What do you call the white of an egg? What do you call the white of an egg? So easy to do. If I hadn't have given you the word folk, you would have stopped and thought. Do you know what I mean? And you would have got it right. What is the white of an egg called anyway, actually? Albumen. Yeah, white. Yeah, the white. Thank you. Do you see how easy it is? That was just a really silly, funny little thing. We're getting these messages all the time about negativity, about particular groups of people, about particular parts of the world, about how people are different to each other. And fundamentally, we're not. We're all different and we're all the same. That's the reality. Which moves me on to some of the stuff you're talking about. Now, you can look at all these different ways. My particular interest, of course, is governance, so I was looking at this from a very much a trustee perspective. But I just fish out some of these stats on diversity and inclusion of trustees in particular in our sector. So only 5.3% of senior leaders of the AME, only 2.25% of those are actually women. 92% of charity trustees are white. There's a 2-to-1 male to female ratio, which doesn't make any sense because there's a 50-50 population, so anyway. Most of them are aged between 55 and 72, the average age is about 62. 75% are well off. 60% have some kind of professional qualification. 30% are postgrads, and 51% are retired. Now you can already see that's skew-if, isn't it? Because that's not representative of the population. Some of the population have these characteristics, but not anywhere near on this level. 51% of the population is retired. 51% of the population probably wants to be retired, but they're not retired. So there's something skew-iffy about that. So basically, your typical trustee is old, white, professional, well-off, middle class, has served for over 5 years and was nobbled. Because again, we don't typically advertise. We tend to nobble people to become trustees, particularly in smaller charities, understandably. But when we nobble people, we have a tendency to nobble people who are a bit like us. And like us, not necessarily how they look. I remember years ago I had to do some governance consultancy for a very large, very famous charity. I won't say who. Anyway, I walked in, and the Charity Commission, the days when the Charity Commission used to go and do liquid inspections, had done a liquid inspection, a test, and they'd come back and said they had problems with diversity on their board, and they were outraged. So I was summoned in to go and talk to them about this particular issue. And they said, you know, how dare they? We're so diverse on this board, it's absolutely ridiculous. I'm like, okay, how are we to understand that then? How are you diverse? And the chair said, well, I'm a doctor, she's a teacher, he's an accountant, he's a... You know, it's like, it's almost going to be, well, but she's a woman, so therefore she's different. Yeah, but she's a professional woman. You know, so there's something about thinking about the sort of broader context in which we operate. However, can I just say something about older? I think we will always have older people as trustees for very obvious, sensible reasons, because they've got to a certain stage in their life where they do have more time and they want to give back. So I think to say it's going to be more is just silly. And also, here's the thing, younger people, they're supposed to be getting on with adulting, learning how to be an adult, although, do you ever get there? You know, there are days I wake up and I'm looking, you know, I'm 56, 55, and I'm looking around for the adult in the room, do you know what I mean? They're learning and they're growing and they're building their families and they're building their careers, so inevitably they're going to have less time to do that stuff. So I would always expect. But there's this other thing about the narrative about older people, which I find really deeply irritating. We kind of change our language. So we talk about older people, this has completely nothing to do with this, but anyway, we talk about older people, we say things like, for a young person, if they fall over, we say, she fell over. For an older person, we say, she had a fall. I said, a fall is something that happened to that person without any agency. We say things like, I'm going out to lunch with my mum when we're younger, I'm taking my mother to lunch when we're older. We have this language which immediately kind of diminishes and sort of infantile. We've got to stop doing that. We also have this story about all these older people who are going to be a burden on the NHS. Well, even if that was true, which I'm pretty sure the evidence isn't there to back it up, older people are also the people who are propping up the bloody NHS. They're the people who are doing the volunteering and the fundraising, they're carting neighbours back and forth to appointments. The NHS would collapse without all these older people who are apparently drain on it. We've got to get off all these silly negative narratives about what the world is like. Older people are not a burden on anybody. And actually, and also because we have this sort of sense, as soon as you get old, I'm not sure what old is. I mean, I know that I was horrified to discover Age UK, you count as old when you're 45 or something. Yeah. Something like that, yeah. Our age that was. Anyway, even if that, we kind of have this notion that old people are all like crippled and full of terrible illnesses and like they spend most of the time in hospital. That's not most older people. Most older people get on perfectly well until they hit their mid-80s and then there's about 6 months serious illness and then they cop it. How is that being burdensome? How is that being burdensome? So let's get out of that stupid narrative, and we have those narratives about all sorts of sections of society. So old people rock as far as I'm concerned. I'm saying that now, of course, because I'm heading that way myself, yeah. The problem is, if we don't really think about mixing it up on our boards, in our organisations and the way we do stuff, we get this groupthink. And when you get groupthink, everybody just dives into the hole, and then somebody at the bottom of the hole says, what happened? And we don't want that. The point is, if you have everybody on your board or in your organisation who looks like you, and I don't mean just physically, I mean, you know, has the same kind of attitudes or the same, or voted the same way in the referendum. If you only hang out with those people, you get very, very one-dimensional, distorted view of the world. The fact is, whether the Remainers are decent human beings and Brexiters Brexiters are also decent humans. Do you know what I mean? It's like we've got to get off this thing. Also, this other thing about like your politics define you. My neighbour, her mother-in-law is, well, she's lovely, but she's, you know, quite sort of, well, she gets a bit prejudiced and things like that. And I can remember my neighbour saying she has a real problem because she says something quite racist on Facebook, like, you know, should she cut her out? And I'm like, well, the trouble is that that's part of her, and there are things you can do to have those conversations, but this is the same woman who adores your grandchildren, who donates money to the local charities involved in, you know what I mean? It's like we have to start seeing people as holistic human beings and stop polarising and putting people in boxes, because when we do that, that's when we end up hating each other. I'm going to just look through this, because I don't think this is really relevant, actually. I thought it was going to be, but it's not. Right, I just want to say some things then about equality. So some of you may have seen this. This is this story about how the difference between equality and equity. Equality is when you give everybody the same thing, but it doesn't actually help. If you can't see over the fence, getting the same as the tall bloke isn't going to help. And typically, the answer to this is to give the shorter person more boxes so they can both see over the fence. This is kind of an old model of it, actually, because the problem with this is this model itself implies that that person, the little person, is inherently flawed because they're little. So it's them in of themselves that is the problem, and we have to help them to overcome that problem. Whereas in fact, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, it's not the person that's the problem, it's the system that's the problem. It's the system that needs to be changed. So a better model is to show that people are more or less the same, it's just some people are starting from a lower point. There's a lower ground upon which they're beginning because they haven't had a proper education, or they come from a broken home, or whatever the thing happens to be. But even that isn't quite right. My favourite, actually, is this one. So you know, obviously, the basic thing is that if you run around the outside, it's longer than the inside. So when you run in athletics, they stagger it, so they all basically run in the same distance. This is what this is about. This is about staggering things so that people who are starting from a different place end up not being disadvantaged by that. Does that make any sense? And I think when you explain inclusion like that, it takes away because when you talk about diversity and inclusivity, certainly as a white person, I start immediately feeling horribly guilty and thinking like, well, you know, and listen, my grandma was mixed race Anglo-Indian, and I still have kind of like worries about it. We start to feel a bit defensive. When you look at it in terms of saying, it's not about any of that, it's about saying all human beings need to basically be running around the same track, if we can possibly do it. But this, I think, is even better. It's even better if you just take away the barriers. You know, that's why one of the things we say at DSC, for example, when we advertise for trustees or staff, we no longer ask for degrees. Why ask for a degree? Do we really need a degree? No, of course we don't need a degree. And as soon as you put degree, you take away, you put barrier. Or some of the language you use. We want feisty, hard-getting, go-getting, you know. Like, if you feel you're that kind of person, which you might do if you're a bloke, you tend not to as a woman, it puts you off applying. So we're just putting out an advert for our trustees saying we want ordinary people who want to do extraordinary things, who want to because do you see something else? So that's going to be more likely to get those people who feel they are ordinary but they want to do more. So it's really about trying to take away all the barriers. Yes, okay, 5 minutes. I'm just thinking, shit. I'm just going to keep going, you have to throw things at me. Anyway, so clearly, Kivo which is the Association of Chief Executives of Voluntary Organisations, did a survey of their members recently, and talking about the major issues that charities face. And clearly, one of the things is diversity and inclusion. This is felt to be a real problem within charities for all sorts of reasons. Again, mostly because of unconsciously having got into the habit of doing things in a certain way, not really stretching. And it was like saying to people, you know, if you want to attract more BAME people, for example, where do I go? And you sort of just want to stamp on their heads, really, and like, what do you mean, where do you go? Like, there's some special place you go. Yes, exactly. Anyway, chaos and uncertainty. Like, you know, my own organisation, Director of Social Change, we're on a shit year, let me tell you. It's, you know, one of those years when you're looking at the bank account every week thinking, oh my God, which bill am I going to pay and can I, and, you know, checking the post and all that kind of thing. Is this, oh, I'm being recorded. We're not saying anything like that. To any of our suppliers, the check is in the post, I promise. But anyway, you know what I mean? It's that, it's really tough, and it's because lots of the charities we work with are hanging on to every penny because they're terrified of uncertainty of what might happen in the future. Even those that have got money and not spending it, because they want to, like, they've got beneficiaries to serve, and who the hell knows what's going to happen after the election, after Brexit and stuff like that. And this is really difficult when you're serving beneficiaries. Also, as many of you in the room will know, we don't know are we going to have, and we've seen a massive increase in people accessing food banks. Those people accessing food banks are also accessing lots of our other services in charities, aren't they? So we've seen a big increase in beneficiaries. Is that going to get worse? Is it going to get better? This uncertainty was doing my head in. I don't know about the rest of you. we're operating within a broken system. It's just not working properly, is it? We've got disconnects between health and social care. We've got disconnects between charities and other charities. You and I were having a conversation, weren't we, about, local authority funding, where, local authority cuts voluntary sector funding. You think that's madness. Because if you look at the voluntary sector, the bit you're paying for is that, what you actually get is that. Because you've got all those free hands and hearts and minds and commitments, and when the money goes away, the charity doesn't. It's just not working properly, but we've got kind of accepting of it almost. It's almost like, well, can't change it. As somebody once said to me, you can't change government, you can't change the political system. Really? I'm sorry, I don't accept that. And anybody who does say things like that needs to be going and doing something else and not working in our sector, frankly. We're funder-led rather than mission-led. That's been increasingly worse. I mean, I'm really pleased to say that funders are really, so there's like a new wave of funding now. Or you'll find your organisations like Lloyd's Foundation for England and Wales, like, now, it's John Rendell at the John Cunliffe Foundation, I can't remember which way around, but anyway, who are doing this thing where they're giving completely unrestricted funding, where you don't really have to do any reporting, they'll come and see you and have a chat and things like that. They're really opening up and saying, like, look, we're going to fund you, the charity, and then tell us what else we can do to help you. It is starting to change. But we charities have been part of the problem because we've trapped ourselves in that hole. We'll just do what you ask us for because we just want the money instead of fighting back. Not even fighting back. Half the time if you go up and say, I don't think this is going to work, do you mind if we use this money for something different? Just having the conversation. We almost don't even have the conversation because we sort of think, well, we better not say anything. So we either lie or we lie. We say, yeah, that's what we're going to use the money for. Again, telling the truth. That's what we have to do. Our value to the fiscal economy isn't properly understood. I just don't get. I think it's again our own fault because we never walk away. But the reality is, our economy in the UK would collapse without charities. If we had to pay for all the stuff that we do in our sector to support our society, we literally would not. We'd have we'd have no money. And yet we're so undervalued. But it's partly because we undervalue ourselves. We say things like, I only work for a charity, or I'm just a fundraiser, instead of saying, oh, we've got the proudest job in the whole blooming world. Nobody even wants to admit to working in politics or civil service anymore, do they? Bless them. So, we never have to go down the pub and mutter, I sell credit cards. Do you know what I mean? We don't have to do, we can be really proud about what we do and shout about it, instead of which we often don't. And of course the threat to independence, the fact that we're being criticised so much, especially by the charity mission. I mean, I'm not allowed to, because it's not in this thing, but dear God in heaven, what is the matter with that organisation? They need to get a grip. They keep saying that we're not trusted by the public. What a pile of poo. Yes, we are. The public's still donating, volunteering, using our services. It's nonsense. Don't listen, all that negative stuff about how crap we are in the sector is rubbish. We're brilliant. You're brilliant at what you do. I'm nearly there, Rob, don't worry. So we can do better. One of the things we have to do is start with PAC. So this is from Civil Society Futures, which is Julie Owen, a great piece of work, but she came up with these 4 things that we can do as charities and as philanthropists and as human beings, actually. And that's about sharing and redistributing power. As a funder, not hanging on to power. As a philanthropist, not saying, because I earned the money, I know how best to spend it. Because you don't. You have a vision and a dream, of course you do, and you've got every right to say this is what I care about, but you're not the expert in the funding of that work or the delivery of that work. So you need to give that power back to the person who you're funding. And also we need to do it in charities. Are we giving power to our beneficiaries? Are we giving power to them to make decisions to get involved? Even our volunteers, actually. Are we sort of moving our volunteers around? Well, the funny thing about volunteers is, sometimes you just wish they wouldn't. It's also this myth, isn't it, is that beneficiaries are all really grateful. And you often get there with people like who kind of not connected, as if, why should they be grateful? It's like, we still have this really Victorian patriarchal view of, like the deserving poor, and if I've helped you, why aren't you grateful? It's like, well, why should I be grateful? It's not my fault I'm in this bloody position, although that's what, of course, what society says. The other thing is about accountability. We have a problem in our sector in that we tend to end up, again, the Charity Commission bangs on about this, that we're accountable to the media or to public opinion. No, we're not. You are accountable to the people you are there to serve. That's to whom you're accountable. Never mind what anybody else says. You tell your funders the truth, of course you do. You engage them, you support them, but you're not accountable to them. It's the beneficiaries you're accountable to. We're not allowed to say things like that, of course, because we have to say we're accountable to funders because they're giving us money. But actually, most of the people I know who give money get it. They're giving money because it's about the people they want to help. and they absolutely understand that has to be a priority, but I think we've lost our way a bit in charities. We need to go back to saying, and to actually to turning down money, saying no, because the way you want me to spend that money is not actually the best way for me to support my beneficiaries, and that is hard to do, but sometimes that's what we've got to do. Connection to our communities. It's also about not seeing each other as the enemy. It's too easy to see, for example, a local authority as the enemy. You know, we have kind of view that civil servants are sort of, you know, they're completely disconnected from reality. They're just hanging on to every penny. They don't care about us. They don't trust us, and they see us as sort of, you know, sandal-wearing, bearded, you know, do-gooders, and that's just the women. You know, and actually neither of those things are true. They're just working in a very, very different system to us. I think we have to have a lot more sympathy and understanding of commissioners and local authorities and local councillors, because we are the freest sector. They're not free. They are not free at all. They're not free from scrutiny, they're not free from the media. As councillors and politicians, they've all got to think about getting voted in. Those are horrible pressures. Not only that, everybody hates them. You know, as soon as you say you can be a really popular person, then you become an MP and everybody suddenly hates you, and all the change was your job description. You know, we don't have that. So the freedom we've got to be glorious and joyful and honest and truthful and challenging and combative, and we should be using those freedoms. And trust. You know, we know what we're doing. We've got to stop being hung back. I can't get it right. You know, if I say like the charitable sector is absolutely awesome, there's always somebody who says, oh, but they're not all. Obviously, it's a bit like, you know, when you talk about, I don't know, the Me Too movement, and you get the, not all men. We know not all men. We're not talking about the all men. Do you know what I mean? There is this thing about, you know, like we need to say you can trust us, and we need to fight for that trust. In other words, and trust is not when nothing's gone wrong. As funders and philanthropists, any of you in the room, trust isn't you trust them and then they get it wrong and then you don't trust them anymore. That's not trust. Trust is you trust them, they get it wrong. You trust them, they get it wrong. You trust them, they get it wrong. You keep on trusting because you know that people are trying to get it right. Does that make any sense? The minute you withdraw trust from the first mistake or the first thing that's gone wrong, then that's not trust as far as I'm concerned. Almost there. Who changes things? The reasonable man adapts himself to his circumstances. The unreasonable man adapts his circumstances to himself. That is why all progress depends upon the unreasonable man. It is not our job to be reasonable. It's our job to fight and yell and stand up for our beneficiaries, because if we don't, who the hell is going to? Or literally two more. Okay, have you learned anything? This is my last test, all right? In the UK, when asked what percentage of people, what percentage of people said they were happy or very happy? The average guess was 47%. 92! I find that so joyful. And of course you're all sat there thinking, that's rubbish because I'm really miserable. Actually, if you ask somebody in the moment, they've had a row with their partner, their kids are not doing well at school, they're worrying about funding, of course they're not. But when you ask people to have it reflect on their lives, and you will know this with the beneficiaries you work with, some of you have worked with some really profoundly disadvantaged people who, if you ask them, will say, yes, I'm largely happy, looking at my life as a whole. I mean, looking around the room, seriously, the world is better than you think it is, but it's also hard work. And I know there are those moments when it's really, really difficult to stay on track and to keep yourself positive, because it does feel like relentless bad news. And don't forget, we are programmed to think, to notice the bad news and to believe that's the truth. So this is my absolutely favourite quote of all time, which I make no apologies if you heard me say this before, but I want to leave you with this. This is the true joy in life. This is the true joy in life. The being used for a purpose, considered by yourself to be a mighty one. Considered by yourself to be a mighty one. The being thoroughly used up before you're thrown on the scrap heap. The being a force of nature, instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community. And as long as I live, it is my privilege. I'm privileged to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. I want to arrive at the gates of heaven with a bottle of champagne in one hand and a packet of fags in the other, saying, you let me in, I can do no more. That was Debra, by the way, not George. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It's a sort of splendid torch that I've got hold of for the moment. And I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Your job is to burn those torches, burn some bridges if you have to, and remember, the work you do is incredible. There are people out there alive because of you. There are people out there who have lives because of you. You're awesome. That is all.